Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about mined squares, which is a pretty simple concept once you know it, but if you don't know it, then this is actually quite an important idea to understand. So the basic idea goes like this. When you have two pawns adjacent to one another, one is white, one is black, both kings have a particular square, which is mined. So in this example, notice that the square on d3 and the square in e5 are what's called mined squares. That means that if the king comes to d3 for white, the opposing king will come to e5. And now, this sort of configuration means that white needs to move, and they don't have any squares to move to that still keep this pawn here on e4 controlled, and therefore they're going to have to retreat and give away the pawn and give away the game from there. Now similarly, if it was black to move, they can't come to e5 because then this king comes to d3. And once again, now black has to move away from their own pawn, and white is the one that is going to win the game. So we have an interesting situation where neither side can step forward and try to make progress, and therefore white is best to just kind of wait around, hoping that black will make forward progress and then blunder the game. But they're just going to wait around, and we're actually just going to end the game like this because of repetition. It's also important to note, depending on the other circumstances, I mean, of course, sometimes white can try to go around the pawn and, depending on maybe if there's a pawn here, they can try to go and grab that pawn and win the game in some other way. And similarly, black might have some other agenda they can try to push for. But if all else is equal and no side can make progress on the other areas of the board, then this is a dead draw. No player, irrespective of who's to move, can ever try to make progress. So this is the basic idea, and it might seem simple enough, but when you then apply it to a situation like this, that's when things get a little bit more complicated. So in this position, the question is simple: does white push the move e5? And I'll give you some time to pause if you'd like and try to find the solution. The answer is definitely yes. That's the only way to win this position. The point is, now you make the pawns again adjacent to each other. So again, there's this concept of mined squares, where as white, you can't come to d5, you can only come to d6. And as black, they're going to wrap around and they're going to come to f5. And these two squares here, d6 and f5, are mined. If white steps onto d6 and then black steps to f5, black will win. And if black steps to f5 and then white to d6, black will lose. Now, because of the tempo here, and because white has a very direct way forward, white actually can win this. So let's take a look how. White is gonna make logical progress towards this pawn. And again, black cannot step to f5 because then king d6, and they lose because again, they have to give away the pawn here. And whenever the king moves, they lose the pawn and they lose the game. So black will not step to f5, they're gonna just wait around. Now, if white just waits around as well, then sure, this could be a draw. But white is not going to wait around, that's the key. They're gonna come to d7. And they're going to attack this pawn from a different angle, where we're threatening to simply take the pawn. Now, the only way that black can defend this pawn is to step onto that mined square, but that leads to a whole lot of other trouble. After king d6, the king needs to surrender the pawn and once again lose the game from there. So again, a practical example where you want to set up the mined squares configuration with two pawns adjacent to one another, and then you need to figure out, are you the one that benefits from this configuration? Will you be able to make progress? Will this be a draw? That's sort of where things get interesting. Now, I'm going to end the video with one final example that I think shows a little bit about the beauty of this sort of concept of mined squares. Because in this example, there's a lot more imbalance. White has a bishop for a pawn. Now, as black, which is to move here, black's move, they played h5. Now, they were thinking, okay, the bishop's going to move, obviously, and then we're going to go g4. And they're just going to trade everything. Eventually, the bishop is going to have to sacrifice itself for the pawn. It's a draw. And that's what they did. They played in this position the move h5 and decided to try to shake hands. But indeed, after h5, that is a blunder because of the absolutely incredible king to f5. And the point is that if they now take the bishop, we take back and it is a mined squares configuration where white is the one that has stepped onto the mined squares last, right? If you switch the order of this capture, the king was already here, and then the white king stepped to f5, it's basically black to move. They're gonna have to give away the pawn and lose the game from there. Now, I should also note they can try the move king to g3, but now simply king takes g5, and once again, we're going to win this position. So mined squares, very simple if you just look at the definition, where it's two squares that either player cannot step into, but then it gets a little tricky when it comes to applying. So hopefully this video helped you be able to apply this concept of mined squares into your own games. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here, like this video if you learned something new from it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.